A dangerous, multi-day severe weather pattern is already in motion, and it is going to impact millions of people across a massive stretch of this country over the next several days. We are talking about a heat dome the size of a continent anchored over the Great Plains, forcing a powerful jet stream to arc around it in a way that is going to unleash round after round of violent weather. A northwest flow, one of the most dangerous patterns in severe weather meteorology, is going to drive storm clusters out of the Midwest beginning this Sunday. And then, as if that weren't enough, a strong atmospheric disturbance paired with a surging low-level jet is going to fuel what could become a powerful squall line tearing through the Ohio Valley on Monday before the threat extends all the way to the East Coast by Tuesday. 3 consecutive days, 3 distinct threats, tens of millions of people in the crosshairs. This is one of the most active stretches of severe weather we have seen in recent weeks. And if you live anywhere from Minnesota to the Carolinas, you need to hear every word of this forecast. Let's step back and look at the full picture before we break it down day by day. The foundation of this entire weather pattern is that heat dome, an enormous ridge of high pressure baking the Great Plains. Heat domes do not just create hot, dry weather. They also act as a wall, forcing the jet stream to buckle and deviate. In this case, that deviation is producing a sharp northwesterly flow pattern aloft. And that northwesterly flow is the engine driving everything we are going to talk about today. When you have strong winds out of the northwest at multiple levels of the atmosphere simultaneously, you create the kind of wind shear that can rotate thunderstorms, sustain long-lived squall lines, and in the right circumstances, produce tornadoes. That is exactly the environment we are staring down heading into the second half of this weekend and the start of next week. Layered on top of that upper-level pattern, we have a trough, a dip in the jet stream, sitting over Canada, and that trough is going to dig southward, helping to develop a full storm system across the northern plains. This system is going to evolve over Sunday and Monday, and its evolution will play a key role in determining exactly how severe and exactly where the worst weather ends up. The Storm Prediction Center has already flagged this system in their extended outlooks, and they have explicitly noted that higher risk probabilities may be needed in future outlooks, depending on how the trough evolves. That is not language the SPC uses lightly. This setup demands your full attention. Now, before we get into the heart of the dangerous days, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, let's quickly address what is happening today, which is Friday and tomorrow Saturday. For Friday, the Storm Prediction Center has issued a level 2 out of 5, slight risk of severe weather across North Dakota and Minnesota, with a marginal threat extending into central Minnesota, and even a separate marginal area across parts of the southeast. The primary threat today is damaging wind gusts and the potential for large to very large hail, with the greatest hail concern focused near the Fargo area. The tornado threat for today is overall on the low side, but if you live near Grand Forks or Fargo, there is an isolated tornado possibility with a rogue discrete supercell. So if you are in those communities today, this afternoon and evening, please stay weather aware. Keep away to receive weather alerts nearby and do not tune out just because the overall risk is categorized as low. An isolated tornado in your neighborhood does not care about the regional risk category. There's also an elevated tornado risk north of International Falls today, with the potential for a photogenic or even significant tornado in that area. Now, that elevated risk sits near and across the Canadian border, so for most viewers in the United States, the risk should remain on the low side. Storms today are expected to cluster and become messy fairly quickly, which generally works against discrete tornado-producing supercells. Timing for today's activity runs roughly from 5 to 8 in the evening across eastern South Dakota near Jamestown, up toward the Angel Inlet and International Falls region. That elevated tornado risk near Bemidji and International Falls will persist into the evening hours. But again, while isolated, that risk is real, and if you are in those specific areas, you should not take it lightly. For Saturday, we are looking at an isolated severe weather day for most of the country. Despite the fact that a large area will see thunderstorms possible, the actual severe weather risk is going to be very low and very scattered. We are talking about an isolated wind and hail threat for your Saturday. Nothing like what is coming Sunday through Tuesday. Minneapolis and even central Wisconsin will have a slightly better chance of seeing thunderstorm activity compared to the rest of the region. So if you are in those spots, make sure you have a way to receive alerts. But broadly speaking, Saturday is not the day that is going to grab headlines. The high-resolution models are not even showing much in the way of storm activity across the Midwest for Saturday. It will be an iffy day in terms of whether we see significant severe weather at all. An isolated damaging wind event is possible, and maybe an isolated large hailstorm if a storm manages to get going. But overall, Friday and Saturday are not going to be the big days. Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday are the days that matter. Let's dig into them. For your Sunday, we have a large level 2 out of 5 slight risk of severe weather encompassing most of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois. And if you are a regular viewer of this channel, this setup is going to look familiar. Because it should. This is essentially the same geographic footprint as a severe weather event that unfolded just about 5 days ago. A setup that produced several tornadoes in Wisconsin and brought a destructive line of thunderstorms through Iowa. We are setting up for a very similar weather pattern in the same region. And the playbook that event ran is likely going to repeat itself in some form. Hit unexpected problems. And the absolute worst time to discover you have no backup is after something has already gone wrong. A backup takes the risk out of every subsequent step. With a backup, every decision you make from this point forward is recoverable. Without one, you are one bad moment away from losing things you cannot get back. How do you back up? The simplest method is an external hard drive. You can buy one for a very reasonable amount of money and use Windows' built-in backup tool, or simply drag and drop your important folders onto it. Our documents, downloads, desktop, pictures, videos, those are the folders where most people keep everything that matters. Copy them to the external drive, disconnect it, and put it somewhere safe. If you want an additional layer of protection, you can also back up to a cloud service. Google Drive gives you 15 gigabytes for free, and that is enough for most people's documents and photos if you haven't already used it for other things. 2 copies in 2 different places is the gold standard. One on a physical drive, one in the cloud. With both of those in place, you're protected against hardware failure, ransomware, theft, fire, and every other scenario that could otherwise mean permanent data loss. Once your backup is secure, the next question is what to do about the operating system itself. And here you have several paths, and the right one depends on your hardware and your specific situation. Let's go through each one honestly. The first path is upgrading to Windows 11. If your computer is compatible, if it has the TPM 2.0 chip that Microsoft requires, and if you want to stay within the Windows ecosystem, this is the most straightforward option. Windows 11 is still receiving full support, and will continue to do so for years. The upgrade itself is free if you're coming from a genuine Windows 10 license, and Microsoft still has tools available that allow the upgrade to happen directly without reinstalling everything from scratch. The compatibility check is simple. You download Microsoft's PC Health Check app. I run it, and it tells you within seconds whether your machine can run Windows 11. If it can, and if you're comfortable staying with Windows, upgrading is a reasonable choice that gets you off the unsupported system and onto one that Microsoft is still actively defending. But here's where things get complicated. A very large percentage of machines currently running Windows 10 do not pass the Windows 11 compatibility check. Specifically, computers manufactured before roughly 2017 or 2018 are very likely to fail the TPM 2.0 requirement. These are machines that are not old by any reasonable measure of actual performance. A laptop from 2016 or 2017 that is running smoothly, that handles web browsing and documents and email without any problems, is being told by Microsoft that it is incompatible with the new operating system. Not because it can't handle the performance requirements, not because it's slow or broken, simply because it doesn't have a specific hardware chip that Microsoft decided to make mandatory. If you're in this situation, if your PC health check comes back negative, then Windows 11 is not your path forward, and you need to think about the other options. The second path is buying a new computer. This is what Microsoft would like you to do. This is, in fact, the logical business motivation behind the TPM 2.0 requirement in the first place. It creates a hardware floor that pushes a significant percentage of users toward purchasing new machines. And if you are already thinking about upgrading your hardware, if your computer is genuinely showing its age in terms of performance, if it's slow and struggling even without the security concerns, then maybe this is the right moment to do it. New computers come with Windows 11 pre-installed. They meet all the hardware requirements by definition. And you get a fresh start with a machine that will be supported for years. If this is the path you're choosing, use that backup you made to restore your files to the new machine, and you're essentially done. But buying a new computer is a significant expense. And for a lot of people, students, retired people, people in countries where technology costs a higher percentage of monthly income, spending that kind of money on a new machine when the current one works perfectly well feels deeply unfair. Because it is deeply unfair. You bought a computer, you paid for it, it works. And a corporation is telling you it's obsolete based on a hardware requirement that conveniently benefits their business partners in the PC manufacturing industry. The frustration people feel about this is completely legitimate, and there's a real answer to it that doesn't require spending money you don't have. That answer is the third path. Linux. And I want to talk about this path in more depth because it is the one that gets dismissed most quickly and yet is genuinely the most powerful option for the largest number of people in this situation. Linux is a free, open source operating system that has been around for decades, but has undergone a transformation in the last several years that makes it almost unrecognizable compared to the reputation it has in the popular imagination. When most people think of Linux, they think of black screens with white text, of commands typed into terminals, of an operating system for programmers and engineers, and people who enjoy making things unnecessarily complicated. That image is outdated. It reflects what Linux was like in the early 2000s, and it has essentially nothing to do with what Linux looks like today for a person who just wants to use their computer. Modern Linux distributions designed for everyday users, Linux Mint being the most recommended for people coming from Windows, have desktop environments that look and feel remarkably similar to Windows. There's a taskbar at the bottom of the screen. There's a Start menu equivalent in the bottom left corner. There's a file manager that works exactly like Windows Explorer. There is a system settings panel that looks and behaves like the Windows control panel. If you sat down in front of a computer running Linux Mint without anyone telling you what it was, and you just needed to open a browser and check your email, you would figure it out within 30 seconds. It is that familiar. The European model currently shows a cluster of thunderstorms developing from Chicago back into central Michigan during Monday, with a widespread wind threat on the table alongside the potential for a few tornadoes. The specifics are going to sharpen considerably over the next 48 hours, and I will have updated forecasts as that happens. Then we reach Tuesday. And for those of you on the East Coast, this is the day that should be on your radar. By Tuesday, the storm system will have deepened and intensified, with the low-pressure center tracking toward the Toronto area. That positioning sets up a dangerous situation for the mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas, where strong atmospheric dynamics and significant wind shear will combine to create a serious, severe weather threat. The Storm Prediction Center has outlined a large slight risk of severe weather for Tuesday, stretching from Philadelphia down through Washington, D.C., and into Charlotte and Raleigh. That is a swath of the East Coast that does not always see organized severe weather outbreaks, which is exactly why this event demands attention. People in this region may not be as accustomed to preparing for significant severe weather days, and that is a reason to take Tuesday's threat especially seriously. The primary threat for Tuesday is going to be damaging wind gusts. There is also the potential for an isolated tornado threat and some large hail, along with the possibility of localized flooding in some areas. I want to highlight one corridor in particular. There is a setup developing that could produce a more focused tornado threat in a corridor running roughly from Richmond, Virginia, up through New York City. Wind shear in that specific corridor is going to be significant, and it creates the potential for rotating storms to develop in that area. This is not a certainty. It is a scenario we are watching. But if you live in that stretch of the I-95 corridor, Tuesday is absolutely not a day to be casual about. Monitor your local forecast closely, know where your shelter is, and have a way to receive severe weather alerts regardless of what the sky looks like in the morning. For New York City, Washington, D.C., and Charlotte, a significant wind threat is on the table for Tuesday. That alone warrants preparation and awareness. Add in the isolated tornado potential and the hail risk, and Tuesday shapes up to be a genuinely dangerous weather day for a densely populated stretch of the East Coast. After Tuesday, the storm system's severe weather production winds down, with Wednesday not expected to produce significant severe weather, but the broader pattern continues to look active. Looking out toward the end of July and into early August, the severe weather threat does not appear to be going away. Additional rounds of severe weather are looking likely across the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Northeast as this pattern continues to evolve. For those of you in the southern plains and the southeast, August is also expected to start on an active note with plenty of showers and thunderstorms, though the severe weather risk in the south carries more uncertainty at this range. The bottom line is that we are entering what could be one of the most active severe weather periods we have seen all month. July has been a relatively quiet month in terms of significant widespread severe weather events, but that is about to change. The end of July and the beginning of August look like they could make up for lost time in a hurry. I want to take a moment and talk to you directly about preparation, because this 3-day severe weather window is not the kind of event you want to be caught off guard by. Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday are each individually dangerous days. Back-to-back severe weather days are exhausting. They are harder to track, and they can catch people off guard because of what is sometimes called severe weather fatigue, the tendency to let your guard down after a first dangerous day has passed. Do not let that happen. Each of these 3 days deserves your full attention, and the threat on each day is distinct from the others. Here is what preparation looks like for a multi-day event like this one. First, identify your safe shelter location right now. Not when the sirens go off, right now. Know where you're going, whether that is an interior room on the lowest floor of a sturdy building, a basement, or a designated storm shelter. Second, make sure you have multiple ways to receive weather alerts. A weather radio, a smartphone with wireless emergency alerts enabled, and a reliable local weather app should all be part of your toolkit. Any one of those can fail. Power outages, cell network congestion, spotty coverage. But having all three significantly improves your chances of getting a warning in time. Third, If you live in any of the areas outlined for Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, pay attention to daily updates as we get closer. The specifics of this pattern are going to come into much sharper focus over the next 48 to 72 hours, and the outlooks are likely to change, potentially with significant upgrades in certain areas. Now, I also want to note something important about the predictability of this pattern. As we talked about earlier, these types of severe weather setups, driven by complex trough interactions and northwest flow dynamics rather than classic frontal systems, are inherently harder to pin down with precision at this lead time. The Storm Prediction Center has acknowledged that explicitly, noting that higher risk probabilities may be warranted in future outlooks. What that means for you as a viewer is that you should expect the outlooks you see today to evolve, not necessarily in a more reassuring direction. The potential for significant upgrades to higher-end risk categories over the coming days is very real, particularly for Monday. Monitor this forecast daily. One more thing before we close, and this is specifically for viewers in Wisconsin and Illinois on Sunday, and in Indiana and Ohio on Monday. If you see a rogue supercell developing in your area on either of those days, treat it as an extreme threat. The northwest flow environment we are describing is precisely the kind of setup where isolated supercells, if they can hold together before getting swept into a larger system, can become extremely dangerous. Wind shear in these environments supports rotation, and a well-organized supercell in a high instability, high shear environment like what Sunday and Monday are setting up can produce a significant or violent tornado. Watch the radar closely on both days. If you see a discrete storm developing ahead of a larger line, that storm deserves respect. The Storm Prediction Center has already begun the process of flagging this event, and as we move through the next several days, you can expect their outlooks to be updated regularly. I will be tracking every update and bringing you new forecast information as it comes in. Live streams are looking very likely for Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday as these events unfold in real time, and those streams will give us a chance to walk through the radar together as these storms develop and move. This is a forecast that is going to keep evolving, and there's a lot still to be determined about exactly how each of these 3 days plays out. But what is not uncertain is the overall scope of this pattern. This is a significant multi-day severe weather event affecting a very large portion of the country. From the northern plains to the east coast, millions of people are going to need to be prepared and weather aware over the next several days. Stay ahead of this one, stay informed, and please share this forecast with anyone you know who lives in the affected regions, because the more people who are prepared and paying attention, the better off everyone is when these storms arrive. Thank you so much for watching today's forecast. If you are new here, I want to personally invite you to subscribe to this channel so that you never miss an update, especially during active weather periods like the one we are heading into right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you're the first to know when new forecasts and live streams go live. We are going to be very active over the coming days with daily updates. Those updates are going to be essential as this pattern sharpens and the storm prediction